Good evening. I will call the meeting to order. And let's start with a roll call, please.
Mayor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Vice Mayor Brown.
Here.
Councilmember DePorter.
Here.
Councilmember Magazine.
Here.
Councilmember Yates.
Present.
Councilmember Tolis.
Here.
Councilmember Leger.
Here.
Okay, before we get started, just a reminder, the last property tax information meeting will be held on Monday, April 30th, in the Community Center, Ballroom number 1. I don't have a time on that.
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. Okay, great, thanks. Discussion with possible direction related to the proposed Town of Fountain Hills fiscal year 2018-19 budget, including all proposed revenues, expenditures, and programs for all governmental funds. Grady?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, before you tonight is the Town Manager's proposed and recommended budget for fiscal year 18-19. The budget is perhaps one of the single most important activities that the Council gets involved in. The budget sets your priorities and plans for the next fiscal year as it relates to town operations and services and setting service levels, as well as your capital improvement programs. Tonight, as we go through this, at the very end of the meeting, you'll have an opportunity to actually make some decisions as it relates to the proposed and recommended budget. So, but certainly along the way, if you have questions as you're seeing the presentation, we'd encourage you to ask questions to keep this a little bit more dynamic so you don't forget your thoughts at the end. We started this process, Craig, probably around October last fall, right? So I mean, this has gone a long time in the department, spending a lot of effort in trying to put together their budgets. One thing I do want to highlight to you, and I see a number of you have your books open, there's what's called the fiscal year 2018-19 supplemental budget requests. We had over $1 million of requests from departments of what they consider to be highly needed programs, services, commodities, and also positions. And of that $1 million, approximately $260,000 is recommended, of which there were offsets of more than $217,000 of either fee revenue or dedicated revenue just for those types of programs or services. So anyways, just want to let you know there's a lot more need, as you'll see when you go through the budget, than there are resources. And as we start getting into the budget, you'll see with the projections over the next several years that we're going to be facing a revenue shortfall. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Craig Rudolphi, our finance director, who is going to be doing the presentation. And then I'll chime in from time to time, and we will probably be bringing in up to the podium different department directors who have other items either the council's asked for them to report back on. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Rudolphi.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. In an effort to keep your interest, I've managed to keep the presentation down to just slightly over 100 slides.
We wish that was a joke, right?
Yeah, right. So just to get started, this is what our vision statement is. It hasn't changed in some time, but it's from time to time helpful and useful to review it to make sure that staff knows what direction council has given us. And these are the values that we try to incorporate into the budget, and those that we constantly consider as we are operating throughout the year. I'm going to preface our 5-year financial forecast overview with some general comments We received quite a number of questions from residents as we have had our informational meetings. The 5-year projection, as you all know, state statute requires the town to have a balanced budget. So the budget for fiscal 18-19 is balanced. A year ago, we did our 10-year financial projection. And the way that 10-year projection was derived was by talking to the department heads and asking them to itemize all of the features that the town should be doing, the costs we should be incurring, the assets we should be maintaining, the maintenance that we should be doing and not deferring. That list, as you all know, came up to roughly $64 million over a 10-year period. Unfortunately, it would not behoove us to throw in that $64 million into any of our near-term forecasts because we don't know that we have a revenue source to cover those desired, needed, deferred maintenance items. So as I put together the 5-year projection, I assumed that the status quo was going to happen. So all of the things that we feel we should be doing have not been included in the 5-year forecast. If we did, the numbers would be outrageous. They would clearly show that we don't have the revenues to support that. So to be more realistic, we've continued the status quo. We've continued to defer the items that we have been deferring. We've delayed purchases. We have not done things that we should be doing. That is the basis for this 5-year projection. It is not including the things that we should be doing. With that, this is a graph of what the 5-year projection looks like. Obviously, 18-19 is balanced, and then we show a deficit increasing as the years progress.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
and I don't want to draw it out any longer than necessary, but as you just stated, we still have to have a budget balance, a balanced budget moving forward. So even though you're showing a deficit, that delta means we're going to have to cut that,
Absolutely.
whatever those numbers are.
Correct.
Period, the end.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And later on in the presentation, you'll actually see the dollars that represent those numbers. So getting into the actual projections for the various funds and various types of expenditures and revenues, this is what we're projecting our general fund revenues. Slight increase. The difference between 17-18 and 18-19 is essentially the allocated portion of the proposed 7 million primary property tax, 1.5 million for the public safety costs. Here's how our expenditures go. As you can see, they're going up much more rapidly than the revenues are. So once again, here's our revenues. They go from 18.1 to 19.6. But our expenditures go from 18.1 to 21.5. State shared revenues, I am not expecting a dramatic increase for a variety of reasons. One, we don't know the impact of the tax cut that was enacted in December. We also know that our population is not going to be growing as rapidly as other entities' populations. Therefore, our slice of the pie, while the pie may be getting bigger, our slice is going to be getting a little bit smaller. Here's what I project for local sales tax. Increasing, but not at a very rapid pace. Our Highway User Revenue Fund, also known as our Streets Fund, a little bit of a decrease, primarily because of in lieu taxes. That is what we charge for encroachment permit fees. For the 18-19 budget, here's the assumptions, and also for the following 4 years. We are proposing, recommending an additional staff of 1.5 FTEs. You can see there the MCSO increase this year was actually 10.11%. I do not foresee a decrease in the following years. Rural Metro, we have a contract through this time period, and so we can count on that 3% increase. Building permits are not going to be dramatically increasing. One thing to point out is that community center debt payment subsidy, that's coming out of the general fund to pay off the MPC bonds. Those will be paid off in July 1st, 2020. That's when those payments drop off. And I've included a contingency of $200,000. Looking at the town's outstanding debt, here's where I project we'll be at the end of 19. So we'll have $5.3 million still outstanding. The revenue bonds, the refunding ones, the ones in the middle of the chart, the $670,000, those are the MPC bonds that would be paid off July 1st, 2020. The town's GO bonds will be done in July 1st of 2020 also. That will reduce any secondary property tax that the town is currently levying. And then Eagle Mountain bonds are paid for exclusively by the residents of Eagle Mountain, and those will be paid off in 2021.
Councilman Magazine?
Craig, the $5,345,000, is that what's still owed both on the community center and what else?
It's primarily the Saguaro bonds and the community center. Saguaro bonds is $3,185,000 of that total. You can ignore the last number, the $1,180,000, because that's paid for Eagle Mountain, and that's not impacted by the town.
Okay, thank you.
So reviewing the total, town manager is proposing a total budget of $39,409,425. That total includes the anticipated proceeds from the proposed primary property tax of $7 million. The reason for that, if we did not include the expenditures in the budget, when you adopt the tentative budget at the next council meeting, that establishes the maximum expenditure that the town can have. So if those expenditures, if that amount was not included in this $39 million and the property tax passes, we would not be able to spend any of the proceeds. So without that, it's a $32 million budget, and that will compare to how we've done in prior years.
Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Leger?
Craig, I just want to, I think it's important to make it clear that the budget you're proposing has baked in the anticipated primary property tax of $7 million.
That is correct.
And what would be helpful, I think, for myself as well as the public, as you go through the budget, if you could illustrate where that is allocated, where those expenditures are, or what line items are attributed to those particular expenditures.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And Craig, if you just want to explain why it's included in the tentative budget as it relates to the state and the requirements for the tentative budget.
The tentative budget, once it's adopted, establishes the maximum allowable expenditures per statute. So we have, as Councilman Leger indicated, have included both the revenues and the expenditures allocated as we have been presenting in our information meetings for the property tax. So the total of the $7 million needs to be included in order to properly reflect what can be spent. Whether the monies are actually spent will depend on if the property tax passes. If the property tax does not pass, then between the adoption of the tentative budget next council meeting and adoption of the final budget on June 5th, I will remove the $7 million in revenues and expenditures from the tentative budget.
Mayor,
Yes, Councilman Magazine.
that last comment implies to me that you would take it from roads, public safety, and so on, the areas that we've talked about before. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
I would like to, I don't think we should automatically look at those items in those amounts to be removed if we have to. So I prefer that we had an open discussion, because it's fungible. And so I prefer we had an open discussion to see if we might, for example, want to take something from somewhere, put it in roads, take something from somewhere, put it in public safety, don't know that it's doable, but I don't want to assume that we're going to take the 7 million from the 4 categories that we've been talking about.
My comment to that was the 7 million needs to be removed because we won't have the revenues to support that. But absolutely, council has the authority to reallocate the monies from one fund to another. And if we find or decide, council decides that they wish to allocate more money to street maintenance, that is possible, yes. So here, our 39,409 compares to these previous years. Some of the highlights, I just said a modest increase in state shared revenue, as you saw from a previous grant. Priority staffing was considered based on necessity. Town manager is recommending a cost of living adjustment of 2.5% effective July 1st and an additional 2.5% effective January 1st for both full-time and part-time employees. Any projected-
And council, just to explain that, in my budget message, I also indicated that I would not be recommending any kind of salary adjustments the following year. So that would be an average of 2.5% a year for the next 2 years. So,
Yeah.
Councilman Magazine.
But as I understand it, you're proposing a 5% increase in the fiscal year.
it ends up being closer because the way it's averaged over 12 months, I believe it's 3.75 over the next 12 months.
Well, if you're
Because
giving
you don't just add the 2.5 and the 2.5, you take it over the 12 months, and it does not end up being a true 5%. That's why I was suggesting it this way.
I think we should have more discussion about that and that approach.
Sure, not at all. And the only reason why it was done was it had to do with the fact that we believe that next year, going into the shortfall situation, it's a very small dollar amount. Craig, what is the amount total on the budget for the year? 130,000?
Approximately 130,000.
So with a small staff, it's a small number, but it is a number nevertheless, and I know that people probably would be concerned hearing about that. But again, if they knew that I wasn't going to be recommending anything the following year, then they would realize that that this is a limit on average 2.5%
I
a
would
year.
simply say the public won't know that.
Well, it's public, it's in my message, and I'm having a conversation. That's why I wanted to bring it up right now.
I've built in a 3% adjustment for inflation going forward. We're going to attempt to maintain existing service levels, although we're not going to implement any new programs. You see the increases for the public safety contracts. And once again, we're not presuming development of the state trust land within the next 5 years. Town manager mentioned our supplemental budget requests. That's on the green sheets in your book. A little bit over $1 million in requests from the various department heads. Town manager is recommending $462,000, broken down as listed in this chart. However, of that $462,000, $245,000 is in new or accumulated prior revenues. So the net increase is only $217,000.
Craig, there's a slide that some of us have here that you removed, but it's not up there. Do you want to just explain that? Because it looked like we skipped it.
It has to do with staffing requests.
Yes, and it looks like budget highlights, it's assumed it's in this year, and it's not. It's just...
That is correct. In my presentation, I've removed that slide. It might have given the impression that the town manager was recommending all of those increase. That is not correct. Those items listed there were from the department heads and what they felt were their critical staffing needs. And so from that, the town manager wound up recommending a total of 1.5 FTEs as an addition.
Madam Mayor.
Councilman Yates?
So again, so everyone does hear, the recommendation based on staff needs were 10 employee position.
Correct.
and the town manager got it down to 1.5.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
And we'll have a little bit further discussion and identify those positions as we get into the presentation. Our increases for public safety, 480,000. This is a listing of the capital projects that are proposed for the next fiscal year. I have an additional slide later in the presentation that will also identify these. Total of $4.3 million in capital projects. All of these projects have been reviewed with council previously as part of the CIP project presentation. So this breaks down by fund how the revenues and expenditures are coming in. Total of 7.1 million of reserves or accumulated funds are going to be used during the year. Majority of that is in the capital projects fund, but we also have a good chunk in the HERF fund. Broken down by category. Maintenance and utilities. You can see that that has a big increase primarily because I don't remember. Capital expenditures are obviously going down because our two major projects will be completed.
Grady, do you remember what maintenance utilities was? Remember the staff members, maybe?
I know that we're going to be assuming additional costs for Adero Canyon, but that wouldn't be that $2 million worth. Was it in the area of streets? Correct?
Very well could be. Yes.
The deltas in pavement management?
Yes. And this is the same totals broken down by department. General government went up by a little, only 1.7 million, but 1.5 of that million is the allocated portion of the proposed primary property tax that we were dedicating to public safety costs. The decrease in development services is due to a staff realignment where we took the engineering division from development services and moved it into public works. Comparing last year's operating budget to this year's operating budget.
Mayor,
Okay, I think I know what you're going to say. Go ahead. I was going to say the same thing.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Fire emergency medical services, what is that?
Rural Metro contract.
Oh, I was looking at the wrong number. Never mind.
Okay, that's not what I was going to say. I was going to say I think it's a little confusing for people to see this and then you say this will be taken out, but is there a way of making a column to show what would be in the tax and what would be not available? Because it looks like,
The only number on this slide that is related to the proposed primary property tax is in general government, and it's 1.5 million.
okay. Let's hope everybody heard that. Okay, go ahead.
Comparing last year's operating budget to this year's, change of almost $2 million. Here's how it breaks down. Once again, the $1,721,000 in the contingency line, 1.5 million of that number is related to the proposed primary property tax. So if that is not included, then we're looking at roughly a $500,000 increase from prior year to this year.
Craig, I know that you said pretty much 10% for MCSO, and that's primarily the PSPRS, right?
Primarily correct.
Okay, but is that taking into consideration any other increases that they might have besides that? Because I know they just pass along to us their cost.
Yes, that is, the 10.11% is all of the increase for MCSO, the majority of which is related to PSPRS.
And you think that it would be the same for the next few years, 10%, or if they're, yeah?
My
even if-
best guess is 10% until proven wrong.
So, just to
Okay.
let you know, Mayor, Council, so in talking to the staff, we were told that right now, for every dollar they spend on salaries, 64%, they're having to contribute towards benefits. Obviously, public safety retirement system is a big part of it, their health, medical, all that. We were told that next year, they're going to expect that to go up to 69%. And they are saying that in the foreseeable future that that's going to be going up. Now, we're not alone in this. All the other cities that have, their police and fire that are in the public safety retirement system who have these unfunded liabilities in the system are seeing these types of increases. And some are trying to buy it down and try to spend money on the front end so that they can avoid having to see these big increases and spikes. But either way, you're going to pay now or you're going to pay later. And MCSO, a few years ago, they were looking at, they had some surplus money, and at the time, they could not spend that money. According to the state definition, the definition of a debt was not something like a pension. And so the legislature changed that, so that's included. But they also had the same issue on the prison employees system that they're in, the prison guard system. Anyway, so we do believe, based on our discussions with the sheriff's office and talking to our peers in other cities, that we're going to see in the foreseeable future double-digit increases of probably approximately at least 10% a year, just due to this one impact on overall police operations.
Okay, thank you. Councilman DePorter?
I think it was before my time, there was a study done about bringing fire service in-house into the town. I don't know what year that was, I'm sure. Things change rapidly. But I'm wondering if we're, just to be prudent, to be monitoring that when those numbers meet. I don't know what that magic number was, but at some point when the increases come to a point that it meets the point where we could have our own municipal fire department, I would like just to explore that. I know that's not a cheap thing to do, but I've said this before. I absolutely love Rural Metro and the men and women who support us here, but the trajectory that company is going, it seems to me that fire suppression is the least of their main concern. They really enjoyed the transportation end of ambulatory services. So with that, I think it's just always be prepared to do that. That, and when it comes to coming from a fire family, it also means a lot to the men and women to have even more of a sense of place in the community, that they could wear Town of Fountain Hills on their back instead of Rural Metro, and they feel even more bonded to the community. So I just wanted to just continue to think about that when that meets up. And for that matter, does that MCSO ever meet at that line too? I don't know.
So we had a request last week from a citizen that just wanted to know how we compared with other Valley cities. We just compared to East Valley. So all the major cities in the East Valley we compared with, and on the public safety, we were the second lowest. Queen Creek was the lowest, and then all the other cities on a per capita basis or on a cost per employee basis were much higher. So I think from that standpoint, we're seeing that we've got really good value. When I looked at the fire, we were kind of in the middle of the pack. And there's some cities you really can't, it's hard to compare with because it's not apples to apples. For instance, Tempe's got a lot of high rises and there's a lot more staff requirements and such. A lot of them are unionized, and a lot of the unions have or require 4-man trucks, and right now we just have a 3-person truck. So those are all things to weigh in at some point. But I thought at least we did the work, and I think we look favorable at this point. But we also know at some point that it's very likely Rural Metro may decide to not be in this service. And so at least we've done our homework on that as well. And we believe it would be a 20 to 30% cost increase from what we're currently paying right now.
So that, I guess that was my point is, does, in 3 or 4 years, or actually, is the Rural Metro increase is 3%
Correct.
right now?
Right
So
now.
it would take a little while, I guess, to get to that, but just to be conscious of that threshold as we get closer to it.
Right. Well,
Because
people
I
don't-
contend too that we have men and women that join our fire department that would leave tomorrow if they got a job for the city of Phoenix.
Absolutely.
Because of their benefit structure that they have, so.
So
don't
we've
want that.
talked internally, and if this ever came to that day, we know that we'd have to be in the public safety retirement system. But the good news on that is we'd be going into it, we've researched this with the public safety retirement board staff, and you'd be coming in with a clean slate. We would not have an unfunded liability like some of these other cities. So Scottsdale, if you recall, Scottsdale went from rural metro, and on the fire side, they have zero unfunded liability from when they went in. That's because they weren't doing retirement or pension enhancements or whatever for their employees once they joined. All the other cities, they got into these enhancements, and they weren't actuarially based, and they end up getting kind of bit by that, so.
Mayor, if I may.
Councilman
I
Lachey?
think it's important for the citizens to recognize, particularly in the conversations that's going on currently, is that we have done the analysis. And right now, it's more cost-effective to be contracting with MCSO and to Rural Metro. And you're absolutely correct. We may get to that break point, but right now, it is more cost-effective. So I guess we'll continue to move in that direction. Thank you.
In Grady, Queen Creek, the lowest, they have MCSO.
They do have MCSO, yes. And I think Craig's mentioned this in our public meetings on the primary property tax. Queen Creek, the state shared revenue kind of, when it starts flowing, they're growing so rapidly that it's always in arrears. And so they've been very cautious to ramp up their staffing until they really get those increases in their state shared revenue. And so they've been able to get by with their budget, but they are, if you look at the benchmarks of all the different cities that we compare to, Queen Creek is the only other city in the valley that is as low as they are on a cost per capita. We're the second lowest, and that's on all services.
Okay, anything else? Okay. Craig?
Just to continue on that vein, our fire costs are $3.9 million. So as the town manager mentioned, if it's going to be 20 or 30% higher, you're looking at $800,000 to $1.2 million additional, which is not a small number. Here's how our budget is broken down by our core services. Public safety, over $8 million annually. The other big item is our special revenue funds. Part of the special revenue funds includes the $4 million for increased street maintenance if the proposed primary tax passes, as well as $1 million for the facilities replacement fund. So $5 million of that $11.5 million is definitely related to the proposed primary property tax.
And once again, without the primary property tax, that 39 million goes down to 32.
Correct.
Okay?
The other question we're getting lots of feedback from is, what are our reserves? What are our fund balances? So here's my projection at the end of 2019, fiscal 19. Total of $13.5 million, 7.2 million in the general fund. That includes the rainy day fund of 2.8 million, and also our designated improvements for 1.4 million. So that's 4.2 million of the 7.2 million is indicated that we need to set that aside for either rainy day or other unanticipated expenditures.
Mayor,
Councilman Magazine?
having little to no knowledge about the thresholds, 7 million strikes me as a lot of money. What has it been in the past?
It's been higher.
Been higher? And how has it been over time? How has it been depleted or used?
Well, beginning with the Great Recession, it was kind of stable, and then probably for the last 3 or 4 years, we have been drawing down the general fund and making transfers either to the facilities replacement fund to maintain its funding, to the capital projects fund to cover some of our anticipated expenditures, and to other funds. We've put money into the environmental fee fund. So that's probably been $2 to $3 million a year for a couple of years.
And you said without the tax, the 7 becomes what?
I did not say anything about the proposed
Oh,
primary property
I
tax.
misunderstood.
Not on this particular slide.
Mayor, if I may, Greg, in light of the conversation that's occurring now regarding the primary property tax, the thought is that we just have this $7 million floating out there. I mean, that's there for a reason, and it's typically determined based on a calculation, isn't it, with respect? In other words, it's to cut to the chase, it's emergency money.
It's an excellent way of describing it.
And it's one-time revenue. So the notion to tap into this, for instance, to do our roads, it's gone because it's one-time revenue and it's taken years to accumulate those particular savings. What formula do you typically use with
The formula
respect-
is 20% of the average of the last 5 years' expenditure, general fund expenditures.
Okay. And why is that developed that way?
Primarily to show good financial stewardship, to set aside monies for those unanticipated, unexplained things that just might happen that we don't know about.
Okay. Thank you.
Greg, and a lot of the debt issuance companies, like, or I shouldn't say the rating companies.
The rating agencies.
They look at having what's called times coverage. You want to kind of explain how that works?
Times coverage is a term related to the revenues the town receives compared to the amount of debt that is outstanding. Depending on the type of debt, whether it's a revenue bond or a GO bond, that times coverage can range from 1.5 to 2.5 times coverage. So if we have a $10 million debt outstanding that requires $1 million annually for debt service, the rating agencies like to see revenues in excess of 2.5 times the $1 million payment, just to know that the bondholders are going to be protected with the payments that are coming in.
So despite what looks like a large number, this actually helps us get our financing costs down because we typically don't insure when we seek, bonds or whatever. So we're getting preferable, interest rates. That's one of the reasons.
The town's debt rating is a AA2 by Moody's. That is unusual for a municipality. Usually most municipalities are AA3 or lower. It's a good reflection on the town to have an AA2. To get to an AA1, I don't think we could ever get there.
Councilman Yates?
Oh, thank you. To piggyback off Councilman Leger, in operations of a municipality or any organization, you keep reserves. This is a recommended reserve barometer that every municipality uses to some way, shape, or form. So having this type of fund balance is not only par, but it's prudent.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The formula may differ from entity to entity, but the concept is still the same.
Thank you.
Councilman Magazine?
Craig, I want to see how you would answer this question. Citizen comes to you and says, you've been telling us that if we don't have this $7 million, that we're in real trouble in an emergency. For example, if the liner goes out and it's $3 million. And they say to you, yeah, but I'm looking at the rainy day fund, you get over $7 million. How do you answer that?
Well, the rainy day fund of that $7 million is only 2.8. So it won't cover the cost of a liner, but as was mentioned earlier, once it's spent, it's gone.
Okay.
It took us probably 10 plus years to build that number up.
So it's 2.8 of the 7,
Correct.
and the rest of it is,
Another 1.4 is an assigned fund balance, which we have said we're going to be using for unexpected expenditures. The rainy day fund, by council direction, is limited to very specific items, not anything that would be normal, not anything that you could anticipate. It's pretty much a natural disaster or some other emergency declaration by either the town or by the governor.
Is there some way to footnote this and indicate that we're talking about 2.8 million, not 7.2 million? Because the average person looking at this, and this has been happening, they look at it and say, what are you talking about? You got $7 million just sitting there. It's a slush fund.
We could certainly look at that. Also, the other thing I think, that's a very good point you brought up, Councilmember Magazine. And then the other thing I think that is really important too is that the example that you just gave, our council-approved financial policies require the repayment of anything that is borrowed from that. It's looked as a loan, not as a gift. So if we have a situation, an emergency, a true emergency, it has to be paid back within
5 years.
within 5 years. So, I mean, in our financial situation, where are we going to come up with that kind of money?
I just think it should be as transparent as we can make it, that's all.
Right. Okay.
And I don't want to
Councilman
beat
Yates.
it. The last time we used this, I think, is when Saguaro got washed out, was it not? Or was there another example of,
To my knowledge, it's never been used.
Henry, I'm sorry to defer to you. You've got seniority. Was there a time that you remember?
I think we're able to cover that, which is budget
Okay.
expenses.
All right, thank you.
So getting into the 5-year overview, these are the funds that the town has. There's now 20 different funds, considerably different than a commercial for-profit enterprise. And typically, these funds are for specific purposes. Not typically, they are for specific purposes. Some are restricted by law. Some are restricted by council. And it is not an easy manner to take money from one and put it into the other. So in my earlier graphical representation of the 5 years, this is the numerical presentation showing the actual dollars of the shortages going forward. And once again, this is excluding all of the projections that were considered in the 10-year financial forecast. If we added those numbers would balloon dramatically. I know there's a lot of confusion. I know a lot of residents don't understand because they see this and they say, next year you're only going to be short $430,000. Why do you need a $7 million proposed primary property tax? I keep repeating that the things that we've deferred, the things we haven't done, the things we should be doing are not included in any of this 5-year projection. It is pretty much a status quo, continue to do what we've done, and as the years progress, we will have to start making some cuts. This is what we've spent on pavement management over the years. And here's how the town has looked in the past and going forward. Town manager mentioned comparing costs for public safety. This is comparing operating costs. We use the Auditor General's official city-town budget forms, specifically Schedule A for the current fiscal year, and Fountain Hills is second from lowest, lowest being Queen Creek, as the town manager had mentioned. In addition to operating costs, we've now looked at employees per 1,000 citizens. Included in the Fountain Hills number are the numbers of FTEs for both police and fire, because we wanted to be comparable to the other entities, other cities that had their own public safety courses. So we didn't want to misrepresent the graph. We were down in about the 1.5 to 2 range if we were to exclude MCSO and rural metro.
Councilman Magazine?
And looking at the previous graph, and then looking at the employees, it almost looks like the second one, employees, should be turned upside down. In other words, if you want to make it equal to the one before it. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
To be in descending order.
Yeah.
My bad.
Ascending.
I'll do that before I go home tonight.
Flip your slide.
So here's where we anticipate our revenues in the general fund to come from.
Mayor,
Oh, Councilman Tolis.
quick question. This is based on 2015. What are you calculating the population of Fountain Hills was in 2015?
Whatever the mid-decade census was put out by the Department of Revenue. I don't know that I have the piece.
Would have been 23 or 24 something.
I think it was a little over,
24,000?
a little over 23.
23 or 24.
I think it was a little over 23.
That put us at 113 employees in 2015.
That's not too far off because you add
Rural Metro and
Rural
MC.
Metro, and so police, MCSO is 36 staffing. And I think fire is 26.
Our population number that we used was 23,899.
It's 26. Fire is 26 and police is 34?
Currently 34, but we're supposed to have 36.
Okay, so 62 plus 55 back then? 54?
Yes.
So I think we're like almost right on.
Operating fund revenues, this includes, although you're not going to see it here, it includes the $7 million in proposed property tax, and it's included in the local tax number. Even with that, we are still roughly 88% of our revenues are coming from local sales and property taxes, as well as state shared revenues. We have very little revenue outside of those two.
Councilman Tolis?
Do you have it even further broken down regarding the local taxes and whether the bed tax and what percentage of the bed tax is incorporated into that?
I have that information. I do not have it with me. I can get back to you with that information.
I'm just curious what segment is growing in your projections going out?
The largest component is the retail portion, retail wholesale, and it's over 50% of the total.
Craig, did you include Copper Wind at the time that this was put together?
Yes.
Going forward? Okay.
Yeah, I remember we had a slide on that once before where the restaurants were pretty high, restaurants were going up.
Correct. Now they've kind
I
of
remember
taken
that.
second place.
Right.
Madam Mayor?
Councilman Yates?
If I may, and most everyone knows this, although gross sales in retail as an industry are pretty healthy, but as we all know, Amazon and online sales are dwarfing in-store sales, which basically means this model that we've been working is not only antiquated, but you're showing it's still as healthy, but it's not going to be. It's retail's changing and it's still healthy, but the way we calculate and the way we collect tax, it's going to be very different. So the fact that our business model shows this much of retail sales in the traditional model is somewhat scary.
Yes. Town's organization chart looks like this. has not changed significantly. And now we're going to get into the various departments individually. So the first is fire. Here is the org chart for fire. Their costs are up 0.9%. We no longer have the CARE program, but we have the crisis response team. Rural Metro's contract is valid till June of 2022, and then there are two-year renewals after that.
Quick question, Mayor.
Sure, Councilman.
Brady, can you remind us why it was in our best interest to do a 5-year negotiation the last time on that? I saw there was some public sentiment around our inability to properly negotiate a contract that way, but I knew there was a reason why we did that.
So we were facing these shortfalls, and I wanted to get a good handle on what this is one of our major significant increase operating costs, and so I wanted to know what we were looking at. We went from our current operating budget last year to a 3% increase for this fiscal year, so it was really no change from anything. And then we received a $31,000 revenue source for parking the ambulance once we get the Fire Station 2 completed. But that's what the driver was, wanting to get that done. It's actually, I believe it's a multi-year, and I believe it's up to 8 or 9 years. It's 5 years initially, and I think it's a 1 year. 2-year.
Oh, a total of 9.
Mayor, if I may, is it also fair to say that by doing that, we were able to lock in at 3%?
That's what we were hoping
So
for.
if we were negotiating at the end of 3 years, more than likely, we'd be looking at higher increases.
Yeah, and the other thing too is well, it's already been stated, but it was just we were trying to address our revenue shortfall issue and trying to understand what our future costs were going to be in this whole area. So there is an out in the contract if something happens. There is they have to give us, I believe it's 12 months notice, and vice versa, if we want to get out of the contract or they want to get out of the contract. So it does have something built in for stability if something like that would happen.
Thank you.
And I think it's also important to note that all of our firefighters and medical personnel are cross-trained now, so that certainly gives us a lot more personnel available, whether it's medical or fire, at any one given time.
Mayor,
Councilman Tolis?
maybe this would be a good time to explain why we can't move back to a fire district. There's a lot of rumors out there and misinformation going out in the public that we haven't considered that option, which I know we have. Can you comment on that?
Unfortunately, I cannot. I don't know if the town attorney can comment.
I haven't looked at that matter right now. We'll definitely get back to you.
I think
I can give my 2 cents. 'Cause
I think Councilman Yates
I
and
think all of us
this.
can.
myself,
We
we looked into it, and
I extensively looked at this,
Yeah.
and right, wrong, or indifferent, the way the fire district was disbanded puts us into a different category. To get a new fire district would require some
Legislative
extreme
approval.
legislative approval to start, and then multiple layers of voting by certain folks that have certain land ownership. It basically was insurmountable.
And we asked Senator Kavanaugh to look into it,
Yes.
and the last community that
And
was
even
granted the
called the
right,
Attorney General to
Right.
find out the legal opinion, and
Paradise Valley was the last community that was granted the right to do it.
actually, that was by prescription. It was not an actual fire district, and that was the last one able to do that. And then the way they changed the law, and they made it retroactive, but basically locked Paradise Valley in, that they're the only ones to do that by prescription.
So the other downside, Councilmember Tallis, is that you probably recall the controversy back at the time when they had their governing body and making some decisions at the time. If we were to request the citizens to consider also forming, after we go through all what Councilmember Yates indicated, they would have a separate governing body, and the town wouldn't have really any kind of say in the future. When I say the town, the organization of the town of Fountain Hills. And so you know, I think that it's been very responsive with the town taking that service over. And we don't want to get back and have history repeat itself with what we saw in the past when the town, it was a very divisive issue, but I think the town made the right decision at that time.
And that would be exactly the same like our sanitary board, where they have a taxing authority. And so it's not like you wouldn't have a tax, it'd just be somebody else would be taxing you. And it wouldn't be these elected officials, it would be whoever is elected to their board. Okay?
Here's how the programs for fire and emergency medical break down. Next is law enforcement. This is the org chart for law enforcement. Total cost was up 9.2%, even though MCSO was up 10.11. There were other costs. We have contracts with Maricopa County for animal care and animal control and sheltering, and those costs are included in this number. We have 3.8 beats plus a school resource officer. And this is how the costs break down for their various programs. Next is our court. This is the org chart for our court.
I'm sorry, Mayor,
Councilman Magazine?
can we go back to law enforcement? Why is there a 9.2% increase?
It's a cumulative over all of the items included in law enforcement. That would be the crisis response team. No, that's in fire. Our animal control went down by 2%, so that offset the 10.11% increase in the MCSO contract.
Okay, I'm with you. Okay, thank you.
Craig, could you explain what we get from animal control for this amount of money?
We have two intergovernmental agreements with the county. One is for animal care and control, so they are the enforcement arm that we can call out as needed for various issues with animals. And then we have the shelter agreement that if they happen to pick up any stray dogs and take them down to their shelters, we are billed for that service directly.
Okay, so like we've had issues in the past with people
We've seen loose dogs running in the
loosing
park,
dogs,
we will
and then
call.
we give them a call and they'll come down and they'll monitor further, and they have the authority to give out summonses, tickets for,
Yes,
yes, okay.
As you
We
can
check
see,
with
I
our
think this is a great value. Again, another one of those
Uh-huh.
intergovernmental contracts that I think really shows to the residents here that we're getting great value for
I just
what
want everybody to know what exactly we get for our money, because sometimes we've been relying on them lately, especially during the winter times, to come out, and they've come out quite a few times.
yes. Our community services director has a direct contact number with the enforcement officer that you can call, and they will respond accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
So not much has changed with our court. They are continuing the teen court program. And this is how their costs break down. They have a total of 3.63 FTEs. And their core responsibilities are listed at the bottom of the chart. General government is next. And here's the big increase, and I've noted that it includes 1.5 million of the proposed primary property tax. And I don't have the percentage that it would increase without the 1.5 million.
We can do the math.
So included in general government are our community services contracts and various memberships that are beneficial to the town as a whole. We've also included a general plan update, which is required by statute that needs to be done by 2020. Administration is next. the organization for the administration department. And these are the services that administration provides. Also included in here that we should make note of is our volunteer program and how much our volunteer coordinator manages and how many people volunteer, how many hours they contribute, and what that would cost us if we had to actually pay for those services. Over $500,000.
And these that you have listed here are the departments,
Correct.
not individuals.
No.
Okay, we just want to make that clear. Councilman Magazine?
Craig, under legal services, what are your assumptions there?
My assumptions were that we were continuing in the manner that we currently have today. Using an average of the monthly billings from our interim town attorney. I just extrapolated that out for the 12 months. It is significantly higher than what we were paying prior to or with the last town attorney. Until or unless we conclude our searches council has directed us to do for legal services, I don't have a better way of gauging what our costs might be.
We do believe it's going to be less, and we're looking at different options. One of the things that we will be doing with the council is in May, we're going to be trying to hold a work study with the council to provide us some direction on the RFP that we have that's ready to hit the street. But we want to get some direction from you. But we do think that this number is inflated, but only based on current year expenditures.
Did you have something?
Yeah.
Yeah, Councilman Yates?
Just to piggyback on that, I saw this also, and if council remembers, we approved some estimate that you made in order to finish the year. But the first few months that the new firm took over, there were some ramp-up costs, and of course it fell into the Adero Canyon deal, which there were some considerable hours. We're not seeing that trend finish for the year, at least I haven't seen the last, but up through March, I believe. That's what the majority was. But to be safe, and I appreciate you presenting that and council approving that, but yeah, this is extremely inflated for a town our size and what the legal services should be. But I appreciate your conservative approach to, we don't have to spend it, but if we don't put it in there, we can't. So,
Correct.
point taken.
And thanks for putting in the volunteer program, because that's tremendous. Not only what they save us, but I would have to say that they are the hardest workers we've ever had, because they just do it because they want to. And some of our best volunteers are actually people who used to work here, who come back and just volunteer. So I'm glad you put that in there.
Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Leger?
To Councilman Yates' point, I took a look at 3 years back, and we averaged $353,000 over those 3 years.
And for any of you that are keeping score, we're slightly over halfway through, so making progress.
Well, we asked you to be transparent. I don't know. We were.
Who's talking too much?
Go on.
Just throw it out there.
What else is new?
So once again, here's how the administration divisions are broken down. Administration has 14.15 FTEs. The decrease in information technology is due to some of the supplemental requests that had been submitted in prior years that were approved do not occur again in the proposed 18-19 budget.
Craig, do you want to explain the town manager increase? Because I don't think that's a salary increase for me.
80.
Doctor?
Did you see that Mercedes? Sorry.
As we mentioned, we are projecting or requesting a FTE increase of 1.5. The full-time position is that of a communications director that has been council priority. So we have included those costs in the town manager's line item. Economic development. This is the plan that our economic development director is using. His costs are going up by 10%, but he doesn't have a big base to start with. We do have an additional year of his marketing agency assistance for $50,000.
And Craig, this number does include the full-time position that was approved for this current fiscal year. Correct?
That is correct.
And it also, there is an offset from the excise tax for this operation as well, correct?
Yes, as council remembers, 80% of 0.1% of the excise tax collected goes to fund economic development.
So like the strategic retail strategies is being paid for out of that funding as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Development services is next. Here's the org chart for development services. Their budget has gone down by 16%, primarily as a result of transferring the engineering division from development services to public works. So here we have estimates of building inspections and code enforcement cases. Development services will also be responsible for doing the general plan update, which is due by 2020. Broken down by their divisions, 7.5 FTEs. The building safety decrease is a result of the reduction in how we anticipated handling building inspections. We had anticipated that we were going to be having a third-party contract for building inspection, but we have now changed our mind and we're going to the model we're currently using, which would be having the developer directly pay the building inspector. So those revenues and expenditures have been removed from the 17-18 budget going into 18-19. Public Works is next. This is the org chart for Public Works. Going up slightly by 0.7%. 70 acres of wash maintenance. The Public Works Director is responsible for the overall capital improvement program and administration, and he also oversees the pavement management program. Broken down by division, total of 5.95 FTEs. And here you see the engineering division that's moved from development services. Public Works is also responsible for our streets fund. They have 4.85 employees. This graph that is hard to see is the same one that was used previously. And they're currently working in Zone 1 for pavement maintenance. But as you know from from last week, presentation of the pavement analysis study, that program may change going forward.
I know, that's not my road.
Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Leger?
Craig, going back to that slide. So we're looking at 148% increase in that area. That is where the $4 million from property tax is being housed in the event that property tax passes.
That is correct, and it's visible on the next slide. I didn't mention it on this one.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So here you can see the middle of the slide, pavement management going from 2.6 to 8.4. 4 million of that 8.4 million is the anticipated increase from the proposed primary property tax. That coupled with our normal $2 million that we spend annually, and we currently have about a $2 million fund balance in the HERF program that the Public Works Director plans to spend next year. That gets us up to our $8 million.
Hey, Craig, on some of these, you wrote a little note on the bottom that which was the property tax. So maybe you could put that down here, so they understand the 2 to the 8?
Yes.
Thank you.
Community services, our org chart for them. They get the distinction of having the most boxes of anybody. They're going up by slightly under 5%. Here's what they have: 118 acres of parks, 740 acres of the preserve. They also do facility rentals for both the parks and the community center. This is their cost broken down by division, 20.76 FTEs. Now looking at a capital improvement program of roughly 4.3 million. Our capital projects are broken down into 5 different categories. We have the revenue from the development impact fees that can only be spent on projects related to growth. Even if we've collected them, which we have for open space and fire, those need to be spent by December 31st, 2020. We have our operational capital, which is normal maintenance funded out of our operating budget. We have facilities maintenance, which is based on our capital reserve study that we did several years ago. We have our capital improvement program, which are our major one-time capital expenditures. This is again the listing of the projects that council has authorized us to move forward with for the next year. Fire Station 2 is the largest cost. In the prior council meeting, council had asked for some information from Community Services Director on Four Peaks Park. So I will now turn the program over to her for her to talk about the Four Peaks Park.
Thanks, Craig. We'll call this our intermission. We're going to focus in on Four Peaks Park real fast to follow up on the 5-year vision of what we'd like to do with that park. I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of council as well as a number of our commissioners to kind of go over where we've come from and where we'd like to go. So, currently, we have a number of issues to address at that park. It may be hard to see on the slide. Hopefully you guys can see it on yours. That park is quite old. It has a number of items that are original to the facility, including the basketball courts, which are featured in these photos. It shows the significant cracking that is more than just surface deep. We have a number of structures over there, including the swing sets that are also 30 plus years old, playground structures that are about 25, and then a number of other rundown amenities that cause just potential for liability. A number of issues beyond that include vandalism. This park suffers quite a bit of vandalism. It is our most vandalized park with regular graffiti. I think I mentioned over our Christmas holiday, we had a number of fire-related issues with melting of the play equipment. We have issues replacing the playground parts when that vandalism happens because they are so aged. So it is a number of issues there. Usability is also a problem. We have no seating, we have no ramadas in the playground area, so if you're a user of that park and choose to use the playground, take your kids over there, you don't have anywhere to sit down. You also have nowhere to seek any shade. So it makes it unattractive for usability. There's no pedestrian access through the primary park zones. If you've ever been to the park, there is no sidewalk. There's no way to get from the parking areas or other amenities such as the restrooms. there's no pathway. You basically have to cut through the existing ball fields. It's just not a user-friendly. There's no accessibility for strollers, bikes, scooters, other park-related means. Parking access to the playgrounds is reduced, and there are no public restrooms in the playground areas. So all of these items lead us to what we would one day like to see, which is this is the master plan of Four Peaks Park. This was developed in 2012 through our Community Services Advisory Commission, as well as public feedback from the residents in that area. It's a little hard to see, but it's a beautiful plan. It's also, right now, it's also billed at more than a $5 million investment, which unfortunately, based on our funding forecasts, is not likely to happen. So what we would like to do is move from our current status, which is what this map shows, our current status, and propose a number of upgrades. While it will not look like that, we do have some ideas to help build our park and renovate specific areas. Specifically, we're going to start with the red area. This area is where our existing basketball courts are. I hope some of us are familiar with the layout of the park. I'll be happy to try to describe it. The basketball courts are also adjacent to where the former bus barn was, as well as the existing volleyball courts, and the aforementioned fence area that will actually be looking to be removed next week once we have the return of our park supervisor and with the help of our public works folks. So that fencing will come down next week. However, the future amenities we'd like to talk about in this area include a reorientation layout of our playground. So what we would like to do is move the existing playground to this area. It would be a demolition of the existing basketball courts and then a big kid playground for 5 to 12-year-olds to be installed over that existing area. If you recall, last council meeting I came forward to request a grant opportunity. This is where that grant would be applied should we get it. A top playground would then be installed in what is now the existing volleyball area. We would add 1 to 2 ramadas for shade and seating, and then a cement seat and walkway to be added for accessibility and safety, and parking would be used in the what's right now is a gravel lot anyway. So that would be the existing parking area. Essentially, this would address a number of issues I just mentioned in terms of accessibility. It would address the issues of visibility and hopefully reduced vandalism because of that.
So are you saying that the grant is going to cover all of this?
Not all of it.
Okay.
If we were to receive the grant, this is where it would be applied, which is it's a $50,000 playground grant. So ideally, what it would do is support this area to enhance it. The 5 to 12-year-old playground area there is quite a big space. It has the ability to be a very attractive playground with a number of different amenities. If we were to get the grant, what that would allow us to do is maybe add additional shading or an additional feature or two within that play structure area.
Okay.
So whether we get the grant or not, this is the layout that seems to be the fit for the number of issues we have at this park.
Sure, Councilman DePorter.
Did this layout include the idea that we talked about with the path from the bridge over for accessibility's sake?
Ideally, yes. What we would like to do is the cement seat and walkway, which is a little hard to see. It's actually not highlighted in this. But if everyone's familiar with where the bridge crosses into this park from...
The bridge to nowhere.
Yeah.
The bridge from the bathrooms to the middle of the ball field. The ball field that's featured here, it would essentially have a walkway that connects from the bridge area around to this playground area so that, again, you can ride your bike, you can ride your scooters, you have an accessible walking path to and from the restrooms and the parking areas on the north field. Yes, so that's what this layout would hopefully accommodate. The cost of this format is roughly $485,000. This is based on estimates that we were able to pull together for this presentation. The basketball court demolition would be the first starting point, and we would move to put in the play structures and then bring in the seat wall and sidewalks, the curbing, additional ramadas, and paving, if possible, of the existing parking area.
Mayor, Council, I think that this option, I didn't even think about this until staff shared this with me. And I think it really makes the most sense because right now, you know, we've got a playground that was originally part of a school, and the school's no longer being used as an elementary school. And so it's just like a playground that there's no real access to. And so we were trying to create access point from the parking lot that's to the south of it. And what we have here is basically a playground that's just at grade that you could walk right into and you could park right up to it. So, I mean, this makes a lot of sense. And then let the ball fields all be what they were intended to be, which is, you know, let those be the active areas and have the playground be away from the active areas.
So this is what we're calling option 1. This is what the staff option recommendation is. Option 2 would be in the purple area here, which is the existing playground. And option 2 would be a revamp of that existing area, which we would still demo and replace the existing basketball court. But in the play area, we would install a large ramada for groups and shading and seating, or we could do 2 smaller ramadas as featured in the layout. We would replace one of the play areas and feature it more for our top amenities for the 2 to 5-year-olds. We would overhaul the existing swing area, which is the big sand and double swing set area for 5 to 12-year-olds, and we would hopefully add a cement wall and walkway, again, for accessibility issues. What this doesn't address, however, is the vandalism format that we have right now. This is somewhat secluded, if you will. It's featured adjacent to the Boys and Girls Club and the EVIC campus, so it's very difficult to see, and this is where we get the most vandalism issues. So this really doesn't address that if we overhaul this area. To Grady's point earlier, when it was a school, this made sense. This made sense for the school. However, now that it is a public park and public access, it makes that much more difficult. Cost-wise, it's about the same. Demoing and replacing the basketball courts would be the largest chunk of that, followed by the ramada, if we do the large ramada installation. And then we would work to, like I said, overhaul the 2 different playgrounds areas.
Mayor?
Councilman Magazine?
I went over to take a look at this a couple of weeks ago. You haven't addressed the grass. Understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's a mess.
You are correct.
What grass?
Which grass area? The ball fields, there's not much that can be done at the ball field level right now with the funding allocations that we have. Ideally, what we would like to do is potentially work with a grant opportunity to redo the ball fields altogether and rehab those completely, including the grass, the infields, the backstops, the bleachers, those types of things. Unfortunately, with a $500,000 budget, that's probably not reasonable under this format. In the future or under grant options, that may be something we could do.
Do we know that it needs more than just watering?
Yes, it does. It's essentially, I would feel more comfortable if Kevin could answer that question for you, but it is quite a bit of, I don't want to say weeds, but that's probably the right word. It's not really grass right now.
And Rachel, without getting into the weeds, so to speak, do you want to just share a little bit of the discussion we had today regarding the potential granting opportunity? You don't have to go into the name, but...
Sure. At the first meeting in June, I hope to come forward with another grant opportunity that we'd like to put in for that would be specific to the ball fields. We have identified a grant that we feel that we would be appropriate and would have would be very suitable for. So we'd like to put that grant opportunity forward for approval, and it would be due sometime in the end of July. And then if that grant came through, it would be something we would know come the early December. So we do have eyes on leveraging this and making this, hopefully our dollar go as far as we can, not only with playground grants, but also with this ball field grant that we're looking at too.
This entity that Rachel was in discussions with was very excited with the other aspects that we would be putting into it. So this entity only does baseball parks or baseball fields.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, they do. But they were pleased to hear that there was other investment going in around to support not just the ball fields, but the park as a whole. So more on that to come. So future ideas here, essentially, the budget that we just talked about can do one of these two options. Moving forward, the purple and green areas, if we move forward with the red option, what we're calling the basketball courts, rehabbing the basketball courts and relocating the playgrounds, that leaves the purple and green areas as potential future options. What would we do? Well, we'd like to still have a basketball court at this park. We have the option of putting a single basketball court up in the upper corner, it would be a single court. It would be roughly $100,000. We would have no fencing and no lights on that specific court. Option B would be to relocate a double basketball court down in the existing playground area. It would be 2 full courts. We would repurpose the existing shade structures to become ramadas and shades. At this time, there is no budget for the lighting. We would need to institute irrigation changes, and we would have no fencing around there, very similar to what you might see at Golden Eagle Park. That would be the vision for that space. Ideally, that space, it would be best to be lit. We would like to work with potential funding down the road to make sure that we can do that. It would make that space much more usable, not only to our community, but also the adjacent Boys and Girls Club for their basketball program. If either one of these options is not something we want to move forward with, there are other options, including sidewalk connectors and seat walls throughout from the pedestrian bridge. Other feature amenities that we were discussing not only internally but also with the Boys and Girls Club was a pump track, roller hockey rinks, multipurpose courts, and then potential pickleball courts. So all of these are future options down the road.
Councilman Tolis.
Thank you. I just want to throw another idea out there that is probably a lot less money than any of these options.
Okay.
And it's something that in Lake Havasu City, they have an RC car race tracks that are just made from dirt mounds, and they have seating, and it brings a draw. Kids, even adults that are hobbyists, that might be something to look at, that in the short term, you can tear all of those old, probably unsafe surfaces and turn that into something like that, even in the temporary, until we know where the funding's coming from in the future.
Absolutely, we could certainly look into that. So for the 5-year plan, right now, the priorities for year 1 are based on the discussion that we had about a $216,000 budget. Should this budget reduce to $100,000 and we move back to $100,000 per year over the next 5 years, we would adjust this. However, right now the priorities for year 1 would be the basketball court demolition, the 2 to 5-year-old playground, the seat wall installation, and then if funding was available, work on the 5 to 12-year-old playground and the potential grant addition to that. Moving forward, we would complete the playground, look to install the ramada and sidewalks, and then complete any sidewalk and pavement of the parking lot. Again, we hope to use grant requests and hope potentially other local donations, whether it's be through civic organizations and things, to really stretch this dollar as far as we can. We've already applied for, we're in the process of applying for one grant. You just heard about another, and should others become available, we will look to leverage those as well.
Councilman Porter.
I just want to just thank you and your team for thinking about this park. Mayor and I have both been in quite a few conversations with neighbors in that area over time, and they're excited to hear that there's some attention being given to that. I think of it from, you hit it right on the head, from a safety and accessibility standpoint. If we're going to pretend like this is the park, let's pretend like this is the park in the town of Fountain Hills. So when I go there with my kids now, I check to make sure there's no sharp edges, no extra burnt, melted plastic. Yeah. I can't get my dad to go in there because he can't take his walker up there because there's no accessibility. So when I think of park, all the things you listed there as far as things that aren't so hot about it, I'm like, wow, that's the worst park I've ever heard in my life. So I thank you for our neighborhood. Mike lives down the street as well, just for paying attention to it. So.
Absolutely. As a user of the park, I can say I have been in your shoes before. I took a group of kids, and inevitably, we were on the playground, and one needed to go to the bathroom, and one left his water bottle in the car, and it made for a difficult park visit. So I can certainly see where the users are coming from in that. All right, with that, any other questions?
Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Leger.
Thank you. Rachel, the price tag, I think, because this presentation is blended with our budget presentation, we need
It
to make
is.
it perfectly clear that this $485,000 is not in the budget.
It is currently in the CIP fund right
There's
now.
$100,000 in the CIP fund,
Correct,
and
with-
that goes to my question. So
Yes.
are you going to be if in fact we approve that $100,000, what are we going to get what type of bang are we going to get for our buck?
Well, the first thing would be a basketball court demolition and the start on the playground structures. So noted here in the priorities for year one, the basketball court really is a liability for us. It is in terrible condition, and it's a trip hazard, if anything else. So that would really be the start of the process, would be to remove that and demo that and begin the installation of the 2 to 5 year old playground and seat walls.
So that's what the $100,000 in this year's budget is targeted for. Are there any grant funds that might be tagging on to that for this FY 18-19?
Well, we do have the $50,000 grant that we are putting in for playground equipment. Pending that, we will continue to look for other outlets for other grant opportunities.
So in theory, the 100 plus the 50 would be 150,000 for...
Ideally, yes.
For the fiscal year.
Correct.
Thank
If it worked out to where the second year of 100,000 was approved as well, we may try to back-to-back those 2 years, so the bookends of the 2 fiscal years, so that we can mobilize and try to minimize those costs and make the dollar reach as far as possible.
Thank you.
Mayor and council, you recall at the last meeting, you had asked for this 5-year plan to see what the possibilities were and how this could be funded. And there was a project in the capital improvement plan for $116,000 to outfit the office area for economic development in the corner over here, but the council opted not to do that. Being that the $50,000 grant for playground equipment is a matching grant, so we would have to match that. We'd only have $50,000 to add to any improvements in this park. So I would recommend the $216,000 to help us jumpstart this. It would be I think, a shot in the arm for the residents. We don't know if we're going to get the $50,000 playground grant. And it also demonstrates to this other organization that we're trying to get the ball fields renovated, that we're committed so that we can be a good partner for them. So I realize this is not going in the direction most people want to see, which is going up, but I think that this would be a great if the council could figure out to add another 116 to this project.
Councilman Yates.
To kind of echo, first I wanted to commend you. This is very strategic, and I love the way that you laid this out. And you've been excellent, you and your department, on leveraging the resources and obtaining some of these grants, and that was one thing we as a town haven't been doing in the past, and you've done great. With regard to this, though, spending this is in all of our general plan, our strategic plan, our economic development plan, attracting families. So to say that it's kind of outside, that's not really accurate, although I know what you meant. Tremendous job, absolutely tremendous job. To leverage that kind of money, and I know that's still $500,000 is a lot of money, but what you're leveraging this and what we receive for this is absolutely incredible. Again, being in the construction to build parks and things on projects is, that's one of those numbers we don't know, and it's usually much higher. So I just want to say, great job.
Thanks.
Mayor, okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. One last question, Rachel. You may recall, I think in a previous meeting, Councilman Tolis had talked about the idea of partnering with the Boys and Girls Club so they could utilize parts of our facilities. Is that a possibility, or what's your thoughts in that regard?
It absolutely is. We have approached the Boys and Girls Club. We've had conversations. We have a tentative meeting set to speak with some of their leadership to begin more discussion about what that could look like and how that could work. For intents and purposes today, we did not include their partnership in this process because there was quite a bit of ambiguity of what they would like to do or how they would like to proceed. Previously, they have had partnerships with the Sons organization, So there had been discussion of whether that may leverage itself to supporting a potential basketball court renovation and things like that. But those had more questions than answers at this point in time, so we would like to continue that conversation with them. They were supportive of overhauling the area. They too have issues with vandalism and things of that nature adjacent to their building. So they were certainly supportive of this concept and investing in this park. And I hope that they would like to continue to partner with us on a financial fee standpoint. We just haven't yet had that conversation.
I understand where you're at in the process. How about the Diamondbacks?
That might be coming forward in June.
Okay.
Grady, I was just thinking about the last, I don't have the previous notes from when we were discussing the budget, but didn't we decide not to spend, it was about $100,000 on something, and we were going to move that over to the park?
So there was $116,000 that was
$116,000.
identified, which the council at the time decided that that wasn't a priority at this point. And so I had suggested maybe if they wanted to help jumpstart this project, maybe combining that with the proposed $100,000 for a total of $216,000, which she has on the priorities for year one. That would be something for council consideration. However, in the budget, in the CIP, it only has $100,000 because we did not want to go beyond what council had authorized.
Okay. Did you have some? Nope. Anybody else? Nope. Go on.
Any partnerships that we can try to tag team, even if we went to Toll Brothers and asked if they can bring their big earth movers and get rid of this basketball court. I mean, you get a lot of people in the community that are doing a lot of work around here that might be willing to help.
Absolutely. We would be willing to take advantage of any of those relationships to help, again, to stretch the dollar as far as we can get it. All right. With that, that'll conclude our intermission, and I'll turn you back over to Craig.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel.
I do have, oh, go ahead, Councilman.
Yeah.
Councilman Magazine.
Before we leave parks, and Rachel, I don't, well, it might affect you. Page 41, we've got a little over $1 million for park development. Page 102, you've got community services parks, $1.2 million. And then you've got $448,000 Fountain Park, which is what, 2.7 million or so. Any relationship between any of those?
I believe those are just all operating costs. None of them are capital.
Well, okay, which, for $1.2 million, community services, which parks are we talking about?
That would be all of the parks collectively.
Well, it obviously doesn't include Fountain Park. That's a separate line item. That's $448,000.
Can you tell us what page you're looking at again?
41 and 10, 41, 42, and 102. I can get the answer later.
If you can indulge us, we'll try to get the answer back to you.
I just had something that was still tied to capital improvement, if Rachel can also approach the podium. Rachel and I were requested at a meeting of the Civic and Cultural Association, the Four Peaks Rotary Club and the Noontime Rotary Club and the Senior Services, Inc., to meet to discuss a project that they had, which was already in the CIP for this year, but it was deferred. It was the Plaza Fountainside project. This was one the council approved to be a multi-year, multi-phase project. We redid the project and pushed it out and deferred it to multiple years starting in 2021. We did a RFP, and it came back on the design to be anywhere between $89,000 and $117,000. Actually, a couple of them said it was going to be between $500,000 and $600,000 to do that project and to do it properly. This group actually wants to continue with one small section of it that is, well, it's about half of it, and it's south of where the courtyard would be paved. It's $80,000. We told them we'd have to bring this up. We're right at the 11th hour, and didn't know that that's what they wanted to kind of really talk about. And then we have put this on the agenda for the May 1st council meeting if you want to consider this. But we're down to the wire on trying to add this to the budget. It would be fully grant funded to do what they want to do, which is a multi-use / bocce ball court, which is really right next to the splash pad. So I'm not sure that that's something the council wants to do, but we'll have a more in-depth discussion. But I'm only bringing it up because that does impact the CIP, because we would have to still budget for that even though it's fully grant funded. So that's why I'm bringing that up at this point.
Where exactly is this going?
It would be actually near the parking lot adjacent to the splash pad.
By Arrivederci.
Yes. And so, Rachel, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, but I was just concerned because when we met with them, we're trying to put the tentative budget to bed, and there's some impacts, and there's some policy questions. So.
Yes, so as Grady mentioned, we'll be bringing this back for a deeper and more thorough discussion at the May 1st agenda, where we'll have more visual aids for you so you can remember kind of what the layout was and what the vision originally started as. And then we can have further discussion about whether to accept the grant funding and move forward with this project. As he mentioned, the bocce ball courts are just one element of the overall vision for that space that was approved this time last year. However, the vision also was original to having them as grass or artificial turf format, where this funding would be to install a gravel base court instead. So there's a number of questions out there still.
Yeah, I'm really confused about that because I thought we had wanted some sort of pavers in front of the plaza area that could be multi-use.
That's what we were hoping to do first.
I don't remember anything about actually putting in something like a bocce court. I mean.
So the only reason I'm bringing this up is if I would have been remiss if we had this discussion on May 1st, and why didn't this come up during the CIP? So I just want to give you guys a heads up, and that, yes, we did have a discussion, but we're not prepared to really have you make any decisions at this point.
Yeah, we'll plan to bring more details back on May 1st and discuss it then.
Okay, I just think that maybe something like that belongs better at Golden Eagle Park, where it's more activities. I don't know. Would that be in keeping with the master plan of the park, having?
We do have existing horseshoe pits at Golden Eagle, so it would fit kind of in that vicinity. Again, the vision for this space was to overhaul and have a community sort of pavered area, whether that be for small weddings or for entertainment or other things like that.
Right.
I think that was the initial thought. We don't have the funding for that portion of that. And these, different community groups have stepped forward to see if they could fund the other side of this this layout in a different format than what was originally visioned. So there's a number of questions still there. Again, it would be adjacent to the existing splash pad. So there's a question of fit with that as well, and then how we see this project moving forward down in the future.
Okay, and I know it's going to be on the agenda, but I have one last question, just so I'm clear. Is this something that would we be supplying the equipment for this, and how would we give this out, or do people have to bring their own, or what?
Right now, the plan would be that it would be supply your own. You would need to bring your own bocce balls, or the surfaces, the courts arguably could also be used for a beanbag toss style game of something like that. But again, you would have to bring your own.
So if you don't have those things, you wouldn't have access to this. You wouldn't have any use for it unless you went out and bought something like this.
At this time, correct.
Okay, I won't say any more about it.
Yeah, and we apologize. It's a horrible timing situation, but I thought giving you a heads up now so you know what to expect on May 1st would make sense.
Anybody else? Councilman Tolas?
If we can comment on this further,
Please say.
I'm just curious whether the owners of the restaurants, the Merchant Association for Plaza Fountainside, has been in any of these discussions to talk about what potentially can go back there. In my vision for that area, and what I'd like to see, is how do we increase the commerce? How do we provide more space for these restaurants and for the ice cream store and all of those restaurants to be more successful by maybe having an extended patio that if you sit out there, you can order from any restaurant, and they have service out there, and we work out some sort of an agreement, some sort of a multi-purpose use. You can have live music out there. You can do a lot of things that will bring in revenue, and bring in revenue for the businesses and for our town. I don't think Bocce Ball is going to do that, but I'd like to see something focused on sales tax revenue and helping these businesses be as successful as possible.
That was the original plan.
I think what Councilman Tolas says is more like what we had in mind when we started this whole discussion.
Thank you.
Else?
Mayor, if I may, yes, I'm as perplexed as I think you are on this. So we clearly indicated in our capital improvement meeting that we didn't want to go with this project.
Anybody else? Okay, thanks, Rachel.
All right, thank you.
Craig, you're back. Slide number
97. We're close, under 10. However,
97.
I still have a concern about what the town manager raised about the park improvements for Four Peaks and the project that was deferred, the $116,000 for the remodeling in the area behind you. To put our CIP together for the adoption of the tentative budget, I need some direction as to whether we should take that $116,000 and add it to the park improvement.
Madam Mayor?
Councilman Yates?
So Grady, to clarify, we said no to that. Where did we
The money
elect
just-
not to
the
use
money-
it, or it's just?
The money is just sitting in the fund because the council said they wanted to have a 5-year plan as to what we were planning on doing in that park, rather than just
Okay.
trust to give us 216 and we take care of,
So this would fit in line with what we said about the 5-year plan,
Yes,
but it's just unfunded, or I'm sorry, it's unbudgeted.
It's unallocated
Unallocated
capital
funding,
funds for
okay.
this project. So right now, only 100,000 from the capital fund is allocated as originally proposed.
And you're showing the 216 in.
Well, 216 as a possibility,
Rachel showed
but
216 as an option.
in the CIP right now, as proposed before you, it's only 100,000.
Gotcha.
Okay, so Rachel has shown us her couple of options for the park, so we do know exactly where the money would be going. So what do we, if we want to move the money over, is that something we need to vote on now?
I would suggest that you do that now.
All right.
Mayor,
Yes.
I don't know if it makes a difference in this discussion, but at some point, I'm going to make a motion to remove some things from the budget that add up to $275,000.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may, and as I mentioned earlier, we're already over our expenditure limitation by $330,000, and now we're starting off here by adding $116,000, when I think it would be prudent to look at ways to get down that 330, so we're within our expenditure limitations. I understand that at the end of the fiscal year, if we don't spend that, then we are not considered over that expenditure limitation. But I think that it would be prudent to budget in a way where we're not starting off by exceeding our limitations. So I would be concerned about that 116 unless we could find a place to womp off 116 someplace else.
Okay, so didn't we already take 116 from somewhere else? I forget what it was that
So
we decided
it was
not
for
to do
this
it.
office remodel in
Oh,
the back.
that's it, the office
Yes.
remodel.
So the council opted at that time not to forego that project, and that money just stayed in the capital fund.
Uh-huh.
So what Councilmember Leger is saying is that we're pushing up against our expenditure limitation limit for next year.
Right.
But a lot of that, Craig, do you want to just explain what that means in terms of, because it doesn't mean we're spending everything that's in the budget. Like, for instance, the public safety money is going to be sitting and parked, but does that count against that limit?
It would, because we have included the entire amount of the $7 million as part of our expenditures. The expenditure limitation is established by statute, and the consequences of exceeding the limit is that future state shared revenue funds would be withheld to the extent of our overspending of the limit. However, I am quite confident that for the next year, even though we're showing a overspending of $330,000, that we will not exceed the expenditure limit.
But it's a valid concern, and we knew that we were going to have to eventually get our expenditure limitation ceiling raised, probably within 2-3 years anyways.
Comments, suggestions?
Mayor, if I may,
Yes, Vice Mayor.
I think it's, if I may, the optics of showing that $300,000 overexpending. I just believe that we need to, even if we just get it down to balance it, I believe we should, and not show that we've got a $300,000 overage.
Councilman Magazine, did you want to discuss your suggestions?
Sure.
Let's go one at a time,
Yeah,
okay?
you may want to vote on each one. I'll tell you what all of them are, and then you can go back. Courtroom benches, $10,000. Communications director, I think about $115,000. Wayfarer signs, $150,000. That adds up to about $275,000.
Okay, let's start with the first one.
I move that as a motion.
Can we start with the first one, courtroom benches?
The funding for the courtroom benches is coming from the Court Enhancement Fund, so it is not a general fund expenditure.
Okay.
Just so the council is clear on that.
But it's still an expenditure.
It is still an expenditure, still counting toward the expenditure limitation.
And how much is that?
For me,
How much?
that's $10,000.
10,000?
Mhm.
Okay.
Again, I'm looking at what's nice to have versus what we need.
Madam Mayor,
Councilman Yates?
as it's, you haven't made a motion yet, or did you?
I just did.
I apologize. But in
I
that,
should ask if we have a second on that.
I think it would make more sense if you did them individually, so.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, but you made a motion
you
for
just
all of
lumped
them?
Oh,
them all
okay,
in.
I'll move that we remove the courtroom benches in the amount of $10,000.
Okay. Do I have a second on that? Nope.
I would just note that I would second that if it was a fund that we could actually save money from.
But you're not seconding it. Okay, so that dies without a second. Next,
I move that we remove the amount, I don't know the exact amount, for communications director.
Second,
whoa, everybody likes that one.
wow.
How much is that?
115 roughly.
Okay, I have a motion and a second discussion on that.
Madam Mayor.
Councilman Yates.
Running a good organization, there's so many different things, whether it's public or private sector, and the fact, and we've all talked about this at varying levels, we need something that sells our brand, communicates to the general public. I mean, the need for something like this is just to operate. This is almost cutting a finger off as opposed to, not getting a haircut. I appreciate where Councilman Magazine's coming from, but I've got some other ideas to save $200,000 right here. But I don't think, I'm open to having the discussion, but some of the problems that we've had in the last year and a half, primarily with just talking about the budget, talking about the primary property tax, talking about economic development, construction, road closures, you name it. Not having a voice out there or a go-to person of where to go to find X or Y for that matter. I think we're cutting off a thumb, not getting a haircut. That's just my 2
Mayor?
cents.
Okay, so, Councilman Magazine.
Councilman Yates is preaching to the choir as far as I'm concerned. I think Grady will tell you that I started discussing this with him about a year ago. We've discussed the need to get word out there, get information out there to the people. We do the best we can with as little money as possible. But I don't think this is the right time.
There you go.
I just don't think this is the right time. I'm all for it eventually, but timing is everything, and I just don't think this is the right time.
Okay, in the spirit of moving this along, let's get a vote on this. We have a motion and a second. How about a roll call vote?
Councilmember Yates?
Nay.
Councilmember Toles?
Yes, yay.
Councilmember Leger? Councilmember DePorter?
Aye.
Councilmember Magazine? Councilmember Brown?
Aye.
I'm sorry, Vice Mayor. And Mayor Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Mayor 6-1.
If I may?
Yes.
Before you go, yes, I may.
Vice Mayor.
As we've already discussed, the legal services line item is extremely elevated. As Councilman Leger pointed out, even though it was an average, it had slightly increased. Very conservatively, we could cut 150, if not 200,000 from what's being put in there. That would put us in line with what we've been spending. I know it's going to be less than 350,000, but in order to be conservative, I would open the discussion for 150, but I'd like to make a motion to do $200,000 cut from that line item.
I'd second that.
Okay, I got a motion and a second on that. Discussion.
Mayor?
Hold on for a second. So what number, what is the number?
It's five, what do we have listed, Craig?
Approximately
524, 770.
524, so.
But I would like to mention that that is all of legal costs, which includes the prosecutor.
Yeah, you have to go straight to attorney.
All right, then to that, thank you, Council. Then, in order to be conservative, I'll do the 100,000, if I can redo my motion.
100,000, motion. Second, got a second? Comment?
Clarification question.
Clarification.
But on page 52, it just says attorney services. Are you saying that that includes the prosecutor?
Councilman Yates, for clarification, you're talking legal fees.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that
Legal
includes the
fees
prosecutor.
Budgeted at 405,000, and the average that I've seen is about 350,000 over 3 years. That $100,000 might
Cut it close.
cut it close, so 50 grand.
The number I was looking at, I apologize, Councilman Leger, was on, same thing, legal services, page 52, proposed budget 524, of which roughly 100,000 is for prosecutor.
So you want, 50,000 would be a good number.
Yeah.
All right,
That's fair.
motion
With
keeps
permission,
changing.
I'll change it to 50,000.
I'll second that.
All right. Any discussion? Roll call vote?
Councilmember Yates?
Aye.
Councilmember Porter?
Aye.
Councilmember Toles?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brown?
Aye.
Councilmember Magazine? Councilmember Leger?
Aye.
And Mayor Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Mayor 7-0.
So we're up to, what, we got 165,000?
65.
Okay, keep a running total of that. Councilman Magazine, you got another one.
Last one. I don't like doing this because Councilman Yates has been involved with this for a long time, and I know it's important to him, and I sympathize. But I'm going to move that the $150,000 for the Wayfarer signs be removed at this time.
Second.
Madam Mayor?
Okay, motion and a second, discussion, Councilman Yates.
More a question from operations. We did an RFP, received it, approved it, work's been done, and I appreciate it because the plan can be used this fiscal, next fiscal, whatever fiscal. So I'm okay with a stepping implementation.
So we already did a deferment on this somewhat. So the the next year after next year, so it'd be 2021, we had the monument signs in that. So we could just push everything back by a year.
Okay.
Is that, so maybe a motion just to adjust the CIP to adjust and push everything back by 1 year?
I'll amend my motion to include that.
Okay.
So clarification, Mayor, if I may. So you're deferring both the wayfinding signs and the monument signs, is that what I'm hearing?
Well, the monument already is. That's been-
It's in the second year of the CIP.
So-
So what I'm suggesting is that in the second year of the CIP, next year being the first year, the wayfinding signs be put into the second year, and then the monument signs be in the third year.
And if I may, currently, the monument signs are in fiscal year 18-19. That's why.
I apologize.
That's why I mentioned both of them, so,
That's 300,000.
you know, so if
So what's the
Councilman.
total of those two?
300.
300,000?
15.
We'll
Okay.
have the designs, which is really great, the design concept, so we will have that to be able to go forward in the future when the funding is available.
All right. Is there a motion on that
I just made it.
with clarification?
I-
Second.
I
Oh, it's
accept-
already been seconded.
Yeah, I'll accept the amendments.
Are we moving all 300,000, is that what
Let's
I'm
make
hearing?
sure we know what we're doing here. Are we moving all 300,000?
So it is 300,000 for next year, and so what I would suggest is just stepping it, so just to remove it in the motion, and that to reassign it in the second and third year.
1920 and 2021.
Absolutely.
Respectively.
That's my motion.
Second.
All right. Roll
That's
call-
good government right there, folks.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Toles.
Aye.
Councilmember Leger. Councilmember Yates.
Aye.
Councilmember Magazine.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brown.
Aye.
Councilmember DePorter. And Mayor Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Mayor 7-0.
465.
Okay, so Vice Mayor says we're at 465.
Well, let's keep going.
Let's put another zero on the end of this one.
Mayor Kavanaugh, if I could mention, I just was told that the contract for finishing the design of the wayfinding signs may not be completed by June 30th. So we may have to, or I would like to request that we carry over whatever funding is not spent this year into 18-19 to finish the design work that's already been started. I don't have a precise number.
Marissa,
Well, the original,
Bob? These guys are good, but
Mayor, wasn't the original contract $100,000 for that?
90.
95, yeah.
90?
So if the contract hasn't been completed yet, does that mean that they haven't started work on that yet?
Oh, no, it's,
No, they have.
Madam Mayor, if I may, it's almost done. What they're asking for is whatever the balance due, we just have to carry that over. It's money already allocated, already budgeted. There's no new expense. We just have, it would up the budget amount for next year, and then we would have an expense to go with it.
The staff had identified, I believe, in the budget that we would spend $75,000 on the study this fiscal year, but 20 we want to carry over for next year. So that would be probably a motion, if somebody could do that.
Is that the number? I'm looking for credit.
I don't know the number, but that sounds probably,
So just for clarification, this company that was out of California, that you contract, you don't have a contract, but they've already done work?
They've got a
oh,
contract.
we have a contract.
Okay, so the June 30th contract, that's something different that you were referring to?
No, it's the same contract. The work may not be finished by June 30th.
Okay.
I move to carry the contract amount over $25,000 from fiscal year 18,
17, 18.
17, 18 to 18, 19.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor 7-0.
So we'll be
Okay.
adding that to that makes it 440.
440. Anyone else have a
Do you have any more?
budget suggestion?
Makes the budget look better.
Okay?
Can I bring another item up, which we've talked about, and let's just get clarification on it again. And I understand there was something with the unpaved alley, the $255,000 for the alley that's behind the pest control, Cummings Pest Control, that whole area down there. And one of the discussion items was that with the MAG, I guess, is that right? That there was an issue with air quality control, or if we're staying in compliance or something to that effect? Is that going to be an issue if we push that back another year for $255,000?
Well, we have continued to push some of these back many years, and then again, this is a policy decision, but my staff recommendation would be not to. I think we just need to really just get these things done. They're cheaper to maintain once they are done, but my recommendation would be to keep it in. As much as I don't want to spend money on an alley, these are measures that the town committed to, and a number of other cities and towns around the valley have done a number of these measures for the PM10, which is particulate matter.
I just think at this point right now, which I understand, Grady, your position, but if this primary property tax does not pass on the 15th of May, money such as this, I think, really needs to be allocated to the areas of this town that are really in dire straits in regards to their conditions. And paving an alley, in my opinion, doesn't take priority over paving someone's street that is going to affect their property values, and I think that's a more important.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Director Weldy, I believe you might be able to help us on this, but it's an unfunded mandate by the EPA that is set up by the state and monitored by the county, and we have so much time to get it done, or they can come in at any time and monitor and give us a fine because it isn't done. Am I remembering some of this correctly?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Brown, I do not have the exact language, but you are correct. We entered into agreement with MAG in regards to PM10 some years ago to take care of all of our unpaved alleys. And these are heavily used alleys, not only by refuse, but also the surrounding businesses use them for access to the back of their property.
Just correction, it's with county air control that we entered into these agreements. MAG, though, because of this, they do monitor, and the only danger is that, like, our shoulder widening and things like that on Fountain Hills Boulevard could get yanked if they realize that we're not really taking our commitment serious towards the air quality. Because a lot of the federal monies that flow into the region for these improvements are for the improvement of traffic mitigation, what helps the air quality.
So how much time do you have?
I do not have that number in front of me at this point in time. I think we've deferred probably 4 or 5 years on this particular one.
Yeah, on this one, but overall, I think we've been working on it for closer to 10.
Correct.
Mayor, if I may, Justin, I don't recall what the scope of this $255,000 was for. Was this for one alley or 2 alleys?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Leger, this is just for this alley right here. We refer to it as Phase 4. There are additional phases beyond this, which would be Phase 5, which are located in the northeast section of town.
So this is one complete alley?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Grady, I'd ask you to help us here. Can we hold off on this until we get a little clearer answer?
What I think would be best is for this just to be part of the tentative budget, and then you guys, when you pass the final budget, we can come back with that information and you can reduce it by that amount at the final budget. Correct, Craig? Yeah, but it would not be smart to take it out and then have to put it back in, because we'll have to cut $250,000 to be able to put it back in.
Good recommendation.
Okay, so any more takeouts? If not, can we bring back the discussion on the 116,000? Because if we took that out of the 440, what do we got, 324?
Yeah, we're off by $6. We have to get it under that number.
Well,
We
then
can make it at 100,000
We
even.
can just,
Well,
how about 100,000?
How about we hold off on the Avenue of the Fountains, La Montana intersection improvement? And wait for a
No.
developer to...
Go walk through there, dude.
Huh? Right across the street?
All right, let's talk about the 100, let's say it's 100,000 for the transfer over to Four Peaks Park.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion for that from Councilman DePorter.
I'd second that.
Okay. Any discussion on it? We've already seen the plan. We can get started on the park for that neighborhood. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, 7-0.
Yes.
So that's 340,000.
Okay. Is that good?
And we need 336?
Magic number was what, 330?
It was 330 in the printed document. I believe it's changed slightly, and I don't have the precise number.
Up or down?
We need to be under that limitation.
We will be under the limitation.
Thank you.
I have a question. Tell me what your line item contingency can be used for. Anything?
Anything.
So, I mean, theoretically, you can put any of the money into a contingency account and then pull it out to do whatever you choose?
Yes, typically it would be best to keep it in the same fund, so the contingency is in the general fund. But coming back to council, council could authorize us to transfer it from the general fund to another fund.
But it's not play money. I mean, it's taken seriously, and we use that for, you know, if we have a situation where a department's going to run over on a project, that's where that money will come from.
Just a point of clarification, Mayor, if I may. However, the contingency in the HERF fund has to be spent in the HERF fund, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah,
Okay,
only-
so only in the general fund can the contingency fund have that flexibility, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Councilman DePorter.
Along Councilman Leger's point, are we going to have another opportunity if we find out we're still above by, you know, $7 grand? Okay, we do have another shot.
If we were off by that much, we would probably just take it out of the contingency. I mean, it's not worth really being too concerned about that. So to his point, to Art's point. So, and was there a vote on the 100,000? I just saw the
Yes.
motion. Okay,
7-0.
wasn't sure.
Yes. Okay, Craig, you want to go, you have any more slides?
Just a few more.
No, sorry.
You said that before. All right, what,
Fee schedule changes. This is something that council will adopt as part of the final budget in the first meeting in June. So I've listed them here. We found that we did not have charges for 8.5 by 11 maps in our fee schedule. So that's what these are. We're removing the dog license fees because we're anticipating transferring that to the county. These other ones, special event permits, are new fees. The development agreement is a new fee. And the public notification and the notification fees are just to recover our actual costs. We had a fixed fee in there, and we found out that we were losing money on every one of those that we advertised in the paper. We're eliminating the commercial fire inspection fee. We still plan to have the actual inspections, but the fee will be removed. And then Development Service is asked to add amendments for PADs and PUDs. The last item is, once again, to recover our actual costs. Personnel, this is a familiar slide. When I prepared it, we were adding a full-time communications director and part-time IT support specialist. We will now remove the communications director. The IT support specialist was something recommended by our external auditors to provide some backup and support for our IT administrator, who you know is only one and all by himself. These are our costs for personnel, which would include wages and benefits, going up 5% without the proposed additional staff. The salary adjustment will be slightly under 130,000 now, and we'll have 55.69 FTEs. Add to that the 0.5 for the IT support specialist, so we'll be just over 56.
Mayor?
Councilman Magazine?
You know, we're telling the community that we're in dire straits, and I'm very concerned about this 5%. I think we get hammered over it. I don't know how else to deal with it, but I just think this is a mistake. I think as I said, I think obviously the naysayers aren't going to change their minds, but people on the fence might when they talk about, you know, how we spend money frivolously and so on and so forth. 5% is a heck of an increase when you look at the CPI and so on, and you look at our budget. I don't know what to do about it.
Mayor, if I may,
Councilman Leger?
you know, I kind of had that same sentiment until I received additional information that that's over the course of 2 years. And to add to that, I was strongly in favor of removing the Director of Communications as kind of as a trade-off to reward the staff that, you know, busting their butts around here. I would probably support your motion if we weren't freezing it the following year. So, I mean, that's just my thought on it. Thank you.
Mayor?
Councilman Yates?
My other 2 cents on this, back to a successful organization, we're asking everybody to do more. And with other communities, and let's use Queen Creek, they're growing, they're going to need staff. And I'd hate to be a feeder for that community. And you all know, in the municipal employee world, that's what happens. People just start leaving. And if we cut salaries or don't give increases or less than neighbors, it's inevitable. You know, your career path takes you where that is. So knowing that the average is 3.7 and then it's capped, I think we can get the message out. Had we had a communication director, we could get, no, I'm just, I think we'll do okay with getting the information out.
The other thing I just want to point out too on this, couple different things. One is a lot of the other cities have basically restored their merit system, so people are able to move within a pay plan. We don't have that. We have not been able to do that. So in other words, basically rewarding performance and having that, and they also still have cost of living adjustments. The other thing is we're one of the few cities that doesn't contribute to Social Security, and Social Security is roughly 6.25%. So they gave cities and towns years ago a one-time opt-out. So just to let you know, our overhead costs of what we have on our employees, you know, I'm just bringing that up because we're not even contributing to Social Security, which is exactly a little bit over what this percentage is. So,
Mayor?
Councilman Magazine?
I don't disagree with a single thing that's been said. And I think the staff deserves it. They work very hard. We have an excellent staff. Let me just ask this, because I don't understand. Why can't we give 2.5 this year and 2.5 next year?
not sure we're going to be able to do that. We were able to program it for next year. We don't know what the future, I mean, we're looking at some very big shortfalls. So that's
And we're talking about 130,000, right,
for all of next year.
for 5%?
For, it ends up being roughly 3.75% over 12 months.
I'm just very worried about the optics, but I understand.
Bob, please write 3.7.
He's talking to you, Bob. Bob will be our communications. Anything else? You got more slides? You done?
I'm not quite done. Hang on.
We are.
Okay, I just want to indicate that with our health provider, the Arizona Metro Health Trust, we have saved money annually in all of our insurances. And so that has kind of kept our costs low also.
Okay.
This was what I started with the evening. That number will obviously be adjusted, and I will have a better number at our May 1st meeting for your consideration. And here's what we have to do next. Our first resolution, May 1st, adopts the proposed budget as the tentative and the maximum expenditure amount. In June, you adopt the final budget, and we also have a implementation memo, as well as approving organization charts, the FTE, the job descriptions, and the pay plan, as well as the fee schedule. And then we come back for the second meeting in June to adopt the final resolution, which is the tax levy for, right now, the secondary bonds. And if the proposed property tax passes, then that will be included in that tax levy.
Okay,
Now I'm done.
109 slides. I just have to say that you can't be any more transparent than this. You have added so much more information than you usually do. So I think it's pretty clear to everybody how much money is coming in, where it's all being spent. Of course, if anybody doesn't understand anything, we are here. If anybody has any questions about anything. And I hope that anyone who really doesn't understand the budget or really doesn't understand a lot of how town functions, they might consider the academy class. I'm sure they'll be having another one. Does anybody know when the next one is?
It's starting up this fall.
Okay. And that's a great way to understand not only the budget, but every aspect of the town and how it functions. Once again, property tax information meeting Monday, April 30th in the community center, ballroom 1, 3 o'clock. Come, ask all the questions you need about that, and get the answers you need.
Mayor, if I may, in relationship to property tax, I think it's important to end on a note basically saying that the money, revenues that come in if the property tax passes has been incorporated into the budget as we stated it would be, and by resolution, this council has agreed to unanimously. And I think that's just an important point to make, that it's not only something we're talking about, a resolution, it's been actualized. It's in our budget, and if we approve this budget, we're approving those expenditures specifically in the way that we've said to the public we would spend that money. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Anything else? Councilman Yates?
Great job, Craig. Staff, wonderful.
Absolutely. Great job, because there was a lot more that went on behind the scenes for a very, very long time, and we do appreciate that. Anything else? Okay, and then I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? I don't think anybody's opposed.